Emotional triggers are not just moments of irritation or sudden sadness, they are doorways into the deepest parts of our unresolved inner pain. When something small evokes a big reaction, it's often a sign that the past is still alive inside you. These reactions aren't random, they are patterned responses from emotional wounds you may not even be aware of. Most people try to suppress, avoid, or project their triggers onto others, never realizing that healing them is the real path to inner peace. True emotional freedom comes when you stop blaming the outside world and turn inward to understand what's really causing your reactions. This journey is not about becoming emotionless, it's about becoming emotionally aware. When you learn to meet your triggers with compassion instead of resistance, they begin to lose control over you. Healing your emotional triggers is the key to reclaiming your power and emotional resilience. When you're emotionally triggered, it's easy to become overwhelmed by your immediate response, anger, withdrawal, defensiveness, or even tears. But that outward reaction is never the true problem, it's just the surface layer. If you focus only on what you're feeling in the moment, you miss the opportunity to dig deeper into what's really happening inside you. The real power lies in identifying the root cause beneath the emotional surge, because no matter how painful or confusing your reaction might feel, it didn't appear out of nowhere. It's connected to something, usually a memory, belief, or wound, that hasn't been fully processed. That's why healing doesn't begin with stopping the reaction, it begins with understanding it. Every emotional trigger is a signal from the unconscious, pulling your attention towards something unresolved. For instance, if a friend doesn't reply to your message and you immediately feel abandoned, it might not be about the message at all. It could be about childhood memories of neglect or a deep fear of being forgotten. In this moment, your nervous system isn't responding to now, it's responding to then. The present becomes hijacked by your past, and until you identify what that past moment was, you'll keep reacting to things in the present that only resemble the original wound. Most people never pause long enough to ask, where is this really coming from? They stay stuck in reaction mode, replaying emotional patterns again and again. But the real question isn't why did I get so mad, or why did that hurt so much? The real question is what part of me still hasn't healed. That's where transformation begins. It's about recognizing that you're not overreacting, you're reacting from a part of you that still feels unsafe, unseen, or unloved. Your job isn't to shame that part of yourself, your job is to listen to it. But listening takes courage. Because to find the root of your emotional triggers, you have to go inward. You have to slow down and stop blaming others for how you feel. You have to stop distracting yourself with noise, avoidance, or rationalizations. You have to become radically honest with yourself about what you've buried. This means revisiting the past, not to relive it, but to liberate yourself from it. You might uncover old abandonment wounds, fears of rejection, beliefs that you're not enough, or guilt that's been living quietly in the background of your psyche. These emotional roots are powerful forces that shape your responses, even when you think you've moved on. Often these roots are formed during early childhood. At a time when your emotional world was being shaped, certain moments, no matter how small they seem now, felt overwhelming, confusing, or painful. And if you weren't given the support to process those experiences, they became emotional splinters. They stayed lodged in your nervous system, waiting to be reactivated. So now, when life presents a situation that even slightly resembles those old conditions, your system floods with emotion as if the original pain is happening all over again. Healing begins when you stop treating triggers like enemies and start treating them like messengers. When something activates you emotionally, try asking yourself, what belief is being challenged right now? What fear is being touched? What story about myself is surfacing? You may find that beneath your anger is a deep sadness, beneath your sadness a belief that you're not worthy of love, and beneath that belief a childhood moment when you didn't receive the love you needed. That's the root, and once you identify it, you can begin to separate your current reality from the old emotional imprint that's driving your reaction. This is why self-reflection is so important. Journaling, meditation, therapy, or even talking with a trusted friend can help you uncover the deeper meaning behind your emotional patterns. The goal isn't to overanalyze or get stuck in the past, but to bring unconscious wounds into conscious awareness. Because once you become aware of the root, you're no longer at the mercy of it. You start to create space between what you feel and how you act. You stop reacting automatically and begin responding intentionally. The more often you do this, the more emotionally free you become. Not because triggers disappear overnight, but because they no longer control you. You begin to see them as invitations to heal, not threats to avoid. And with time, what once activated a powerful emotional storm becomes something you can observe, understand, and even feel compassion toward. That's when you know healing is happening, not when you no longer get triggered, but when your response to the trigger is grounded, aware, and calm. Remember, your triggers are not signs of weakness. They're not proof that something's wrong with you. They are evidence that something happened to you, something that deserves your attention, care, and healing. Identifying the root instead of reacting to the surface is an act of self-love. It's you choosing to show up for yourself instead of abandoning yourself when things get hard. It's a shift from being at the mercy of your emotions to becoming the master of your inner world, and that changes everything. When a trigger hits, your nervous system doesn't ask for permission. It floods you with emotion, tightens your chest, clouds your mind, and suddenly, you're no longer in control. You're reacting. But there's a narrow window, sometimes just a few seconds between the trigger and the reaction. That window is sacred. In that space you have a choice, to react blindly, or to pause and make a conscious decision. Creating inner space before the reaction takes over is how you reclaim that choice. It's the difference between being owned by your emotions and owning them. And it's this tiny shift that begins the process of healing emotional triggers at their core. Creating inner space doesn't mean suppressing what you feel. It means giving what you feel room to breathe. Most people, when triggered, either lash out or shut down. Neither response allows for reflection, curiosity, or clarity. But if you can catch yourself in the moment, even for just a heartbeat, you create space between stimulus and response. And in that space something powerful happens: awareness. You begin to witness your reaction rather than be consumed by it. You start to notice, my chest is tightening, or I feel abandoned, or I'm about to explode. That noticing is a small act, but it's everything. It signals that you're not just inside the reaction, you're also aware of it. This space can be built with practice, mindfulness techniques, deep breathing, grounding exercises, or simply becoming aware of your body sensations. These are tools that slow down your internal process. When a trigger strikes, your body reacts faster than your conscious mind. But breath is your bridge. Taking one deep intentional breath can interrupt the automatic pattern just long enough to bring your awareness back online. You're not stopping the reaction, you're creating room around it. Enough room to observe, to question, and to make a new choice. This inner space also helps you respond with emotional maturity. Triggers are often fueled by old stories, narratives that were formed in the past and now distort the present. Without space, those stories run unchecked. But with space, you can start to question them. Am I really being rejected? Or is that my past speaking? Does this situation truly mean I'm not good enough? Or is that an old belief resurfacing? By creating that brief pause, you give yourself a moment to engage your inner wisdom, instead of just recycling emotional patterns. Sometimes the inner space reveals just how intense your inner child is crying out to be heard, and that moment of pause is not just for control, it's for compassion. You begin to see that your reaction is not a sign that you're broken, but that a younger part of you is still seeking resolution. That realization only comes when you slow down. Speed is the enemy of healing. It pulls you back into reaction before reflection. But slowing down just enough invites insight, presence, and care. There's a reason why ancient philosophies and modern psychology both emphasize witnessing your emotions. Because the act of watching yourself without judgment is itself healing. When you create space, you shift from being the emotion to being the observer of the emotion. And when you observe with compassion instead of judgment, you allow the energy of the emotion to move through you instead of getting trapped in you. This movement is what transforms emotional pain into emotional intelligence. The more you practice creating this space, the stronger your self-regulation becomes. You're not avoiding or escaping your triggers, you're holding them with awareness. That awareness gives you access to deeper parts of yourself, including your needs, boundaries, and wounds. Instead of reacting with "you never listen to me," you begin to respond with "I'm noticing that I feel unheard right now, and that's hard for me." That shift doesn't just heal you, it transforms your relationships. Because now, you're no longer spilling your pain onto others, you're owning it, understanding it, and expressing it with honesty and care. There will be times you miss the space, times you react fast, get swept up in emotion, and only reflect afterward. That's okay. The goal isn't perfection, it's practice. Even recognizing that you missed the space is growth. It means your awareness is expanding, and over time, with consistency, that space grows wider. What used to consume you in a second, now takes a minute, then 5. Then you find yourself responding with clarity in situations that used to unravel you completely. That's emotional mastery. Not the absence of triggers, but the ability to hold them with grace. Creating inner space is not about becoming passive or emotionless, it's about becoming present, fully alive to what's happening inside you without being ruled by it. It's a subtle, powerful practice that requires patience and persistence, but the reward is freedom, the freedom to no longer be hijacked by every passing emotional storm, and to begin responding to life in a way that's conscious, grounded, and true to who you really are. Blaming others for how we feel is one of the most common and unconscious habits that keep us stuck in emotional suffering. It's easy to say, "I'm angry because they disrespected me," or "I'm hurt because they didn't care about my feelings," but when we speak this way, we unknowingly give away all our emotional power. Our inner world becomes dependent on other people's actions, moods, or words. This dependency is the root of emotional triggers. When we blame others, we keep the illusion alive that we are victims of their behavior. In truth, emotional triggers are not caused by what others do, but by what their actions awaken within us. Past wounds, old beliefs, unresolved memories. Healing begins when we stop outsourcing our emotional responsibility and instead turn inward to ask, "Why did this affect me so deeply?" That question breaks the pattern. Blaming others feels natural because for a long time it was all we knew. Many of us grew up in environments where emotional responsibility was never modeled. Maybe our parents yelled when they were stressed or became cold when hurt, and we internalized that reactions are justified when someone else causes them. We were never taught to pause, reflect, and investigate the real reason behind our emotional responses. As a result, we now feel entitled to our reactions, as if others are responsible for the way we feel. But the truth is, emotional reactions are rarely about the present moment. They're echoes from the past that get reactivated. Someone ignoring us today might trigger the memory of being emotionally neglected as a child. Someone criticizing us might awaken the voice of our inner critic that was formed long ago. It's not the present person we're reacting to, it's the pain from within. When we stop blaming, something powerful happens. We reclaim authorship of our emotional state. That doesn't mean we justify poor behavior from others. It means we recognize that even when people act out, our reactions belong to us. We can acknowledge that what someone did was unfair or hurtful, while still recognizing that the emotional storm we feel is ours to navigate. This is not about taking blame, it's about taking ownership. There's a massive difference between saying, "It's my fault they hurt me," and saying, "It's my responsibility to understand why this hurt me so deeply." The former keeps us stuck in shame. The latter moves us toward healing. Owning our emotions doesn't mean suppressing them either. In fact, it invites us to feel them more deeply, but with awareness. Instead of exploding in anger or retreating in silence, we slow down. We observe our emotional response like a curious scientist. What is this really about? What belief just got activated? What old story am I reliving? With that kind of self-awareness, we start to see the patterns. We begin to notice that every time someone disrespects our boundaries, it's not just about that moment, it's a reminder of all the times we felt invisible, dismissed, or voiceless. And when we understand the root, we can finally begin to heal it. Blaming others also keeps us locked in resentment. It creates a false sense of control, as if we could fix our pain if only they changed. But that puts our healing in someone else's hands. We can spend years hoping they apologize, understand, or behave better while the emotional wound inside us remains open. The more we expect others to fix our feelings, the more powerless we become. True power is when we realize, they don't have to change for me to feel whole again. That's the essence of inner freedom. We stop needing the outside world to arrange itself perfectly so we can be okay. We start creating safety, peace, and meaning from within. When we stop blaming, we also create space for compassion, both for ourselves and others. We realize that just as we are carrying pain, so are they. Just as we have triggers, so do they. That doesn't excuse toxic behavior, but it helps us step out of the cycle of reactivity. We learn to respond instead of react. We speak our truth without needing to control or punish. We set boundaries not out of anger, but out of self-respect. We understand that emotional maturity is not about being unaffected, it's about being self-aware. This journey takes time. Letting go of blame is not a one-time choice. It's a daily practice. We might still find ourselves pointing fingers, feeling wronged, or replaying old stories, but every time we catch ourselves and shift the focus inward, we break a little piece of the pattern. We come back to our center. We realize that healing isn't about changing the world around us. It's about changing the relationship we have with ourselves. And that change begins the moment we stop blaming others for our emotional state and start listening to what our emotions are trying to teach us. Emotional triggers are powerful forces that often seem to hijack our thoughts, reactions, and even identity. A simple word, a look, a delay, or a rejection can unleash a storm inside us, one we can't always explain but deeply feel. In those moments, many of us either lash out or shut down, acting out of habit, not consciousness. But healing begins when we stop letting our triggers control our responses and start allowing them to teach us something about ourselves. The trigger is not the problem, our unconscious reaction to it is. When we become curious instead of reactive, we create a space where inner transformation is possible. A trigger is nothing more than an emotional messenger. It arises to show us what still hurts, what we still believe about ourselves, and where we're still not free. Most people treat triggers as problems to get rid of or signs of weakness to hide. But in truth, triggers are doorways. They open up hidden parts of us that we've ignored or suppressed for years. Maybe someone's cold tone makes you feel invisible. That's not about their words, it's about an old wound in you that still believes you're not important. Or maybe a partner's delay in texting you back sends you into panic or anger, not because of the delay itself, but because it activates an old belief that you're not loved or that people always leave. These emotional responses are not flaws, they are maps. They are showing you exactly where the pain lives inside you. To let the trigger teach you instead of control you, you need to pause when it arises. This moment of pause is sacred. It interrupts the automatic chain of reaction. It allows you to shift from "why is this happening to me" to "what is this showing me about me?" In that question lies power. Because once you make the trigger about your own inner landscape, not about the other person, you take back your control. You're no longer a puppet pulled by old strings. You become a conscious witness to your emotional world. The teaching often comes in layers. On the surface, the trigger may seem to be about someone else, but the deeper you go, the more you'll find that the core pain is internal. It's the story you've carried since childhood. Maybe it's the belief that you're unworthy, unlovable, unseen. The trigger pokes that old story, and that's why it hurts so much. But here's the opportunity. When the old wound rises, it becomes visible, and when it becomes visible, it can finally be healed. but only if you're willing to feel it instead of fight it. Feeling is not the same as drowning in the emotion. It means allowing the emotion to rise in the body, witnessing it without judgment, breathing through it, and asking it what it's here to reveal. Sometimes the trigger is telling you about a boundary that needs to be set. Other times, it's pointing to a part of you that needs reassurance and compassion. The more you listen, the more the trigger becomes your teacher. And slowly, with time, the same things that used to destabilize you will lose their power, not because the world changed, but because you did. There is deep strength in this work. Society often rewards control your emotions, control your emissions, control your reactions, but real strength lies in vulnerability, in turning inward when it's hardest, in facing the emotional storm without letting it define you. When you learn from your triggers instead of reacting blindly, you're not just healing, you're evolving. You're turning pain into wisdom, reactivity into presence, and chaos into clarity. The people who trigger us the most are often our greatest teachers, not because they are right or justified, but because they mirror back to us what we haven't yet resolved within. Their behavior becomes the spark, but the fire was already in us. We can choose to keep blaming the spark, or we can turn inward and understand the fire. That's how you stop being a victim of your emotional world and start becoming the master of it. To let your trigger teach you is a practice. It won't happen overnight. Sometimes you'll catch it in the moment, other times only after. That's okay. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. With each trigger, you gain insight. With each insight, you become more aware. And with awareness, you reclaim the power that was once buried under reactivity.